Dimebag Darrell Abbott, he was 38. Abbott was shot point blank by an unidentified man who witnesses say climbed on stage and began screaming, allegedly about Pantera's breakup, before pulling a gun on Abbott during the first song in Damageplan's set at the Alrosa Villa nightclub Wednesday night. The shooter, whose name is being withheld by police, also killed 3 others, 2 of whom have been identified as fans, Nathan Bray and Eric Hulk. A spokesman for the Columbus Police has offered no motive for the killings. The shooter was also killed by a Columbus police officer who arrived at the club. Darrell Abbott was one of the most admired guitarists in heavy metal. He and his brother Vinny, who later drummed for Damageplan, were founding members of Pantera, whose 1994 album Far Beyond Driven debuted at #1 thanks to a strong fan base of thrash and heavy metal fans. The brothers formed Damageplan after Pantera split. We'll have much more on this story as it develops, both here and at mtvnews.com.
Turned his weapon on the crowd. At least 3 other people were killed before a police officer acted alone, took the gunman out. His colleagues calling the officer a hero for preventing more bloodshed. Now, Damageplan's guitarist Dimebag Darrell Abbott, as we say, was one of the original members of the hugely popular heavy metal band Pantera in the early 1990s.
4 fatalities from the gunman, and the gunman makes 5.
That was Sergeant Brett Mull of the Columbus, Ohio Police Department describing some of what went down at a nightclub there last night. He said that a 25-year-old named Nathan Gale went on a deadly rampage at a show by a heavy metal band called Damageplan. Witnesses saw the gunman jump up on stage. They say he fired repeatedly at the band's guitarist, Dimebag Darrell Abbott, before he turned his gun on the crowd. He managed to kill 4 people, including the guitarist, before a police officer showed up, acted swiftly, and shot the shooter dead. Here he is, Sergeant Nijmeyer, being called a hero today. Police say if he did not show up when he did, the whole thing could have been a lot worse. Well, the concert gunman had people running for their lives, and one of the people on the scene was Justin Cottle. He joins us now live on the phone. Justin, can you tell us in your own words what you saw last night?
Yeah, it was shortly after 10 p.m., and Damageplan had just taken stage, and I don't think they were 30 seconds into the song, and we heard a couple of loud pops. I immediately recognized it to be gunfire, and people started screaming, "Dime was shot, Dime was shot," and as people were taking off and running, I became not a fan, but a person who saw another person's life in danger, and I jumped on stage and was just holding on to Dimebag and telling him that it was going to be okay, and I was screaming, and there was chaos, and I don't know what was going on. I was trying to help another human being. I got blood all over me, and I don't know what happened after that. I was asked to leave the stage, and I left on my own accord. Somewhere in between all that, I was injured. It's just very hard for me to talk about.
Justin, I appreciate that. I know you were there. You are an eyewitness, though, and some of what you saw and what you heard could be very important in the investigation. Have you been talked to by police?
I spoke with a Columbus detective. I don't think I should divulge that information.
Okay, well, understood. Let me just ask, though, there have been discussions about what the gunman said when he jumped up on stage. Can you tell us that?
No, I cannot, because I did not see the guy jump on stage, and the music was playing, so we didn't hear anything except the gunfire. But I know that he was screaming something at him, but I didn't catch what it was.
Now, when you actually took Dimebag Abbott in your arms, was this after the gunman had been shot, or while the shooting was still taking place?
There were 3 to 5 shots fired after I got on stage. I believe Dimebag was shot one more time while it was up there, and I assumed that the other shots that were fired were the cop when he killed the guy.
All right. Justin, we very much appreciate you coming on, Justin. We can We can understand your feelings at this point, and we do thank you for calling in and sharing that information with us. Justin Cottle, who was a witness to the shooting last night in which 5 people were killed in Columbus. We'll give you more updates on the situation as that police investigation continues.
Somebody came, I don't know where they came from, out of the audience or whatnot, but they come onto stage, and they basically, he shot the guitarist at first, fired a couple other shots, and then he hid behind stage a little bit, and then everybody started scattering. You know, there's mayhem everywhere, and then a police officer came into the building, you know, came in professional with his gun raised, and then he proceeded to shoot the guy, the murderer, or whatnot. He shot him, blasted him away.
A deadly shooting at an Ohio nightclub. I'm Patty Ann Brown. Police credit an officer on patrol in Columbus for saving a hostage during this chaotic concert scene. They say the gunman, 25-year-old Nathan Gale, charged on stage at the club and opened fire. 4 people were killed before an officer arrived to find Gale holding a hostage in a headlock. The officer shot and killed Gale. Police are still looking for a motive.
This is another Fox News alert. Real-life horror playing out at an Ohio nightclub. Police say 25-year-old Nathan Gale went on a deadly rampage shortly after the heavy metal band Damage Plan began playing. Witnesses say the gunman fired repeatedly at the band's lead guitarist, DIMEBAG DARRELL Abbott, before turning the gun on the crowd. He killed 4 people before he himself was killed by this police officer, James Nijmeyer. He showed up. He's being called a hero after he swiftly shot the gunman. He just happened to hear the ruckus going on in the nightclub. He was on the beat. And police say if he didn't show up when he did, the whole thing could have actually been a whole lot worse. And we are going to go now to Ted Nugent, the musician and activist, gun activist, joins us now on the phone from Crawford, Texas. Ted Nugent is with the United Sportsmen of America, in addition to a lot of other activities he's involved with. We have him on frequently. Ted, what are your first thoughts about this shooting?
Well, first of all, I salute the good officer, James Nijmeyer. He did a great job, and that's once again proof that the firearm in the hands of the right person can neutralize such evil. But I think that it's a tragic loss when innocents are killed, particularly in America, when they're killed by fellow Americans. And I would look into the history of the perpetrator to see how recidivism plays in this equation. But we have to look at Washington, D.C. and Chicago, where no one is, for the most part, even allowed to own any type of firepower at all. And there are these kind of murders that happen there daily, not to mention Rwanda and the Sudan. So we would never blame the tools of the methodology, but rather the perpetrator and what causes this to run wild in this great nation of ours.
Now, Ted, when you were playing on stage, do you ever have any fear of being shot by some nut in the audience?
Well, you know, I'm a pragmatic guy. I watch the weather to make sure I'm not in the line of a tornado. I'm conscientious of my surroundings to make sure that I take the proper precautions. But when you're playing music, there's a primal scream going on, and it really is disconnecting. You kind of go with the flow, and it's probably the most vulnerable environment that anyone could ever find themselves in. But to answer your question, I'm aware that there are demons out there, but I do not allow it to compromise the flow of my music, the amazing musicians that I get to jam with and perform with every night. I don't want to be burdened by the fear of such evil. So the answer is no, but I'm still cognizant of my surroundings, and I would just hope that we would get to the bottom of this perpetrator and find out what he was doing, what caused this, and whether we've had him in a cage before and decided to let him out of this cage.
he may have a criminal history that we don't know about.
Yeah,
they're going to be checking rap sheets.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah, right. Well, the key is whether or not things are going to change as a result of this incident. I mean, it might just be a lone nut, and this is the sort of thing that would never be repeated. But sometimes these things lead to changes. Should there be some kind of security on stage, for example, that there wasn't last night?
Well, if I can comment, David, you know, I've done over, I guess I'm approaching my 6,000th concert coming up here next week. I tour constantly because I really crave that musical outrage. It's really very inebriating. It's very fulfilling. So I know that there are gazillions, uncountable hours of fine American recreational enjoyment going on in concerts nonstop in this country, and this is the first incident of this outrage, so let's make sure we keep it in perspective. And I would hate, as I just stated to an interviewer while I was preparing to call you, that I don't want to live in a police state. I don't want to go through magnetometers everywhere I go. In fact, I will fight to make sure that we don't. What we've got to do is we've got to identify dangerous, illegal, demonic people, put them in a cage, and leave them there. That being said, we will never be able to eliminate the evil in American souls. There's methamphetamine labs within a mile or two of everybody listening to us right now. And those methamphetamine labs and those crack dealers and those drug dealers and those demons, they are our fellow Americans, and we're not turning them in, and we're not stopping them, and that is job one today.
Yeah, and who knows what might have motivated this guy. It might have been drugs. We don't know as of now, but we will continue to follow this investigation. Ted Nugent was kind enough to give us a call. Ted, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah to everybody.
Same to you, Ted. Thanks a lot.
Esther, we have new details on that gunman who opened fire at a nightclub in Columbus, Ohio. Police say 25-year-old Nathan Gale jumped the stage as the group Damage Plan started playing. He is said to have killed a guitarist before turning toward the crowd and gunning down 4 others. At least, well, the numbers are fluctuating, frankly, on how many others he may have shot. Gale was eventually stopped when an officer shot and killed him. Steve Brown is live at the scene. Steve?
Hey, Linda. Yes, obviously a very chaotic scene last night when this band was starting to play. That's when everything broke out. That is when eyewitnesses say that Nathan Gale, or a person later to be identified as Nathan Gale, jumped onto the stage, began shouting at Darrell Abbott, nicknamed Dimebag, the lead guitarist for Damage Plan, began shouting at him and began opening fire. It was a chaotic scene that broke out, and if it were not for police intervention, fortunately there was an officer nearby, the death toll might have been higher. There's one thing we need to point out. The number of victims at Gale's hand are 4, but that number possibly, and we're hoping not, but that possibly could climb. One of the people injured, as we were told, is in ICU currently. We don't have an identification on that individual, but we understand that there is at least 1 victim from last night's shooting that is in the intensive care unit at a local hospital. Now, police say that they are still piecing together what's happening. They know that there is some sort of amateur or home videotape that was shot inside the club last night, and they say they are still trying to get their hands on it to try and piece together exactly what happened. What they don't know and are clearly confused about, or clearly has some questions about, as to what the motivation was for Nathan Gale to go up there. According to at least one witness, it looked like to him, or to that witness, that everything was plotted out. As soon as the band started playing, that's when the person, identified as wearing a hockey jersey and a hooded sweatshirt, jumped up on stage. So it appeared to at least one individual that it was all plotted out, and police acknowledge that it does appear that it was somewhat orchestrated on behalf of Nathan Gale. Gale fired shots, killing Darrell Abbott and then 3 other people before a police officer happened in on the scene. Now, the name of that police officer is James Niggemeyer. He has been on the Columbus Police Department for 5 years, has never been involved in a line of duty shooting, and he was last night. As we understand it, Niggemeyer was patrolling here in the North Columbus area when he heard the calls from the club. He came to the club and without backup entered through the back entrance to the club and found that Gale was holding a hostage at the time. Now, the details of which are very unclear, and Columbus police don't want to get into it right now, but at some point, Niggemeyer opened fire, shot, and killed Gale while he was either near or in control of a hostage at that time. Columbus police say that that is a situation that if he was not there at that particular time, there's really unknown what could happen. Again, Columbus police really unsure as to exactly what the motivations for Gale were. Here's some comments from the police department just a little while ago.
But right now, we don't see any connection at all. That could change. Again, this is a fluid investigation, but we see no connection with him and the band, no motive at this time.
Again, they're still trying to piece together what happened inside, and probably most questioned in the minds of the police officers taking a look at this is what might have triggered this, what might have set off Nathan Gale to come into a nightclub armed and start shooting, jump on stage and start shooting. The police investigation is still in its infancy, but they do know this. They have 4 dead, 1 seriously injured, and the gunman, the perpetrator, also shot and killed. Police saying, again, if it were not for the actions of Officer James Niggemeyer, the death toll might be a lot higher than it is right now. Linda?
Steve, thank you. Chris Couch is an eyewitness to this crime. He was at last night's concert. He saw the shootings happen. He is with us by phone. Chris, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Help me piece together what happens in the moments before the suspect opened fire. You were with someone and you were sitting on the upper tier of the stage, so you were above the stage looking down, and then you saw the suspect come in. What did you notice about him?
Yeah, I was actually back probably about 20 feet from the stage, about 2 feet higher next to the soundboard. The guy came in at a pretty steady pace. He looked like he was on a mission to do something. There was a bouncer and another guy following him, for reasons I don't know. The guy that was following him did shine a flashlight on his back like he saw something, yet they couldn't get to him in time. He walked up on the left-hand side of the stage, which there's some steps that lead behind the stage. He came behind the speakers, walked straight out right over to DIMEBAG, Darrell Abbott, the guitarist, pointed his gun at him, started screaming. I don't even think the guitarist even saw it coming, and just started unloading on him. At that point, what's up?
Let me just jump in. As you saw him open fire on the guitarist, you must have been in disbelief.
Oh, I didn't even know it. It was just unreal. I mean, it was the last thing I expected to see. Obviously, I mean, you don't expect to see someone get shot, but it was absolutely insane.
So after he opened fire on the guitarist, did someone try to grab the suspect and take him away?
Yeah, what happened was he shot the guitarist once, and then the guitarist fell back into him, and he continued to shoot him while he had a hold of him. Somebody else in like a flannel shirt grabbed the gunman and tried to pull him off of Darrell, and at that point the gunman turned around and shot him. And at that point we were starting to move away, and I saw the gun go off for the 6th or 7th time, and it was all happened in like 5 seconds. I grabbed the girl we were with and I said, "We're getting out of here. I'm not staying around any longer than I have to."
This suspect sounds like he was pretty physically powerful. Are we talking about a big guy?
Yeah, I'm guessing he was probably 6'2", 6'3". He was not a small man. And he was on a mission from the time he walked past us.
But right now, we don't see any connection at all. That could change. Again, this is a fluid investigation, but we see no connection with him and the band, no motive at this time.
Went up around the left-hand side, walked right behind it, right on stage, straight for the guitarist, like he had something with him, and just started unloading on him. He probably shot him about 5 times.
If this was a premeditated act, the apparent target was the guitarist who was shot first, Darrell Abbott, better known as Dimebag Abbott. Abbott is well known in heavy metal music circles because he was a member and lead guitarist of Pantera, which had something of a cult following, especially in the early 90s, and even garnered a Grammy nomination for that genre. Darrell and the drummer, his brother, Vinny Abbott, put together Damageplan, who was playing here last night at this particular venue, and had only begun to play their very first song when apparently Gale jumped up on stage, shouted something at Darrell Abbott, and then began firing into him. According to witnesses, 4 or 5 shots into Abbott, and then turning the gun on the audience, and other people apparently were trying to pursue or subdue him. Again, if it were not for the actions of one police officer who happened to be patrolling in the area, the death toll from this horrible scene might have been much higher. Officer James Niggemeyer was on patrol in the area, heard the call, went in through the back door without backup, putting himself at great risk, came inside, and according to Columbus police, he apparently was holding a hostage at the time. Somehow, during the scuffle, the hostage got away and gave Officer Niggemeyer an opportunity to try and defuse the situation. That did not happen. He opened fire and shot Nathan Gale. Nathan Gale died on the scene. Now, we are piecing together who this Nathan Gale was by combing through the neighborhood where he was last known to live up in Marysville, Ohio. We apparently believe that he was possibly, and it seems to check out, a member of the armed forces, specifically of the U.S. Marines. We don't know the tour of duty nor the length, but the U.S. Marine Corps says, yes, they did have a Nathan Gale from Ohio, born in September of 1979, who did serve in the U.S. Marine Corps. People who say they have observed Gale in the past in the neighborhood said that he was a loner. One waitress at a nearby restaurant near his home said that he would order a meal, finish it, and sit there for a long period of time, long after the meal was gone. Again, we're piecing this together, but it does appear that Nathan Gale was a member of the U.S. Armed Forces at one time. We're still scrubbing up the rest of the details on that. Martha?
All right, Steve, thank you very much. Steve Brown out in Columbus, Ohio. Well, the band on stage last night was an offshoot of one of the most popular metal bands of the late 80s and 90s. DAMEBAG was formed by one of the victims of last night's shooting. He was known as DIMEBAG, Darrell Abbott, and his brother. After the group Pantera disbanded, they formed the new group DAMEBAG. Now, Pantera hit its stride in the early 90s with albums like Vulgar Display of Power and Far Beyond Driven, which debuted at #1 when it was released. Some consider Dimebag Darrell one of the most influential musicians of his time. His name mentioned with the likes of guitarist Eddie Van Halen and even Jimi Hendrix. We're going to take a closer look at his life and his career later this hour. As you know, this was a horrific scene, as Steve Brown was telling us, in Columbus, Ohio. And one of the questions that it raises is the culture of this kind of music. We're going to be talking a little bit later to Tommy Lee and Vince Neil of Motley Crue about the origins of this music and the sort of lyrics that are sung by these musicians. You know, you hear really two different sides of Darrell Abbott and his brother. They're, you know, said to be great musicians and great people by those who knew and loved him. And we're going to hear from some of them this hour. Murder at a heavy metal concert, the tragedy sending shockwaves through the music world today. Fans and friends and fellow musicians mourning the loss of former Pantera guitarist Dimebag Darrell Abbott. Joining us now from L.A., two members of one of the biggest metal bands ever, Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee of Motley Crue. And tickets for their latest concert tour are going on sale now. They also have a new album out. Nikki and Tommy, thank you, both of you, for being with us today.
Absolutely. How you doing?
I'm all right. Nikki, tell me a little bit about your reaction, first of all, to the loss of Dimebag Abbott and what it means for your part of the music industry.
Well, actually, Tommy called me last night. It was like right when I walked in the door. I was like blown away because I just spent the day with Dime in London, and we were just tearing it up, having a great time. And the thing is, it's the wrong guy. You know, for something like that to happen to. He was a sweet soul. One of the few guys that doesn't care about the business, just cares about being a musician. And I don't know, for me, it's, I think politicians are going to start looking at, gun control and stuff like that. And I think the real issues should be looked at as mental illness, because, why would somebody do something like this?
Tommy, there's been some speculation that when Pantera broke up, that maybe this fan was disturbed and upset about them abandoning Pantera. What do you think about that? I mean, is that something that other bands and that you worry about in terms of creating such an ardent fan base that someone, might do something like this?
Well, you know what? I'd rather not even comment right now. Darrell is a very close friend of mine, and I'm just going to leave it out for now.
Right.
Sorry.
It's kind of hard to talk about.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
I'm sure it is. Nikki,
most important thing is we'd like to just, wish his family and his brother, obviously, is
who was right up there on stage with him, and it must be just devastated today. Nikki, let me ask you this. When outsiders, people who aren't that familiar with them or with their music, look at it, and they look at the websites and the posters, and they read lyrics from songs about death and violence, that a lot of people will look at that and say, well, this is a culture that created something like this.
Well,
how do you respond to that?
The people that would say things like that would be sort of on par with the mental illness that I was talking about. That's completely ridiculous.
That's retarded.
That's retarded.
Tommy, let's talk a little bit about your upcoming tour and your own music, and just with regard to this incident, does it change how you feel about security as you launch your upcoming tour?
Maybe we should just go down to another subject.
Sixx and Tommy Lee, we wish you the best of luck on your tour, and
Thank you very much.
And our sympathies for the loss of your good friend, and we wish you all the best. Thanks very much for being with us today, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'm now joined by Julia for a look at Abbott's life and career. She's the hostess of the heavy metal show Uranium, which is seen on the Fuse channel. Julia, I saw you sort of nodding your head and agreeing with a lot of what they were saying with regard to the way that the music is interpreted and how some people who look at it from the outside who aren't fans might get the wrong message. But in some ways, how could they not get the wrong message? You know, I was just looking at some of the lyrics, and there's a lot of stuff in there about murder and about killing and about death.
None of it ever promotes any of that. The only thing it talks about is standing up for yourself and for your rights and not following anybody else. And the things that they talk about, such as murder and death, it's a comment on life. It's a comment on people dying everywhere, every day, on war, on politics, on everything. It's not promoting fans or any individuals to go ahead and do that. It's more of saying, take a look at this. This is what our world is, and it's really messed up.
I just want to take a look at some lyrics that we put together for a graphic, and then I want to ask you specifically about Dime and his life. Here, this is from Death Trap by Pantera. It says, "Now I search for another victim to come. I can't explain the sheer thrill of it all. It's such a chill to watch the meek just fall." And it goes on to talk about killing. How can that be interpreted as anything but that?
Heavy metal music, especially death metal and black metal and heavy metal in general, has always spoken in metaphors. It has a lot of gory images, and it's basically a way that, you know, instead of going out and killing somebody or doing something like that, we take out our aggression through poetry, through going out and joining at concerts and, you know, dancing together and doing whatever. But it's like saying, you know, this guy, you know, I grew up and you know, this guy was a jerk to me, and, you know, I really wish that he got his, but never really ever promoting any kind of violence.
So being able to put it into the music rather than the violence?
That's always what it has been. It's always been, we've always tried to explain to people that it's strictly a metaphor. I mean, Ozzy had a lot of problems with this too, if you remember, about 15 years ago with his lyrics where, you know, they were saying he was promoting Satanism and this and that. There's a lot of very feeble-minded individuals out there who are not strong, who are not strong enough to think for themselves, and it's not the music's fault or the artist's fault whatsoever.
I'm sure there's going to be quite a bit of talk about that over the next hours and days, but I just want to ask you quickly about him as a person, because I was also reading some personal accounts, and you were saying, you know, this happened to completely the wrong person. What was he like?
This was the most life-loving, sweetest, friendliest person I have ever met. This was somebody who just wanted to have a great time, who wanted to share his music. He has changed the lives of millions and millions of kids around the world. For me, Pantera was a band that got me through really hard times when I was younger, prevented me from doing something horrible to myself. This was somebody who gave me strength to be, you know, to feel that I'm my own individual and to go on and do my thing. And this is somebody who just inspired so many musicians and people around the world to just do music and love life and just party and live it up and have a great time instead of focusing on the terrible things in life and just getting it out through music and going to a show and dancing around in a mosh pit instead of going and beating somebody up or doing something of the sort. And that's what people misunderstand all the time.
All right, Julia, the loss of a talented man in the music business. We appreciate your being here to talk about it. Thanks.
As bad, as awful as this story is, it could have been a whole lot worse if it were not for the actions of one man, a Columbus police officer by the name of James Negemeyer. Negemeyer was on patrol in this area north of Columbus when he heard a call of shots fired at the Alrosa Villa nightclub. He responded without backup, entering the back of the building, searching out the gunman. Witnesses say it was a chaotic scene, but somehow Negemeyer found the gunman, and according to at least one witness, the gunman by the name of Nathan Gale had a hostage, had somebody in a headlock, and was about to bring the weapon around, apparently to fire again into another person, when the officer fired and shot Nathan Gale dead. That ended the siege inside the nightclub. Now, there are 4 people dead, including the gunman. One of them, very famous if you are a heavy metal fan, a man by the name of Darrell Abbott, better known to his fans as Dimebag Abbott. Dimebag Abbott was one of the fixtures in a pioneering heavy metal rock band known as Pantera. That band garnered an Emmy nomination and pioneered a lot of, as I said, the heavy metal music styles, or much of them, as we understand it, were copied from Dimebag Abbott and his band Pantera. Now, he has formed a new band with his brother Vinny Abbott. The two of them put together this band Damage Plan, and they were out touring in support of an album, as we understand it, were here last night, had only begun playing their very first song when apparently Nathan Gale jumped up on the stage and started opening fire. As we understand it, the person that Gale had in a headlock, the person who he was apparently bringing the gun around to fire again at, was Vinnie Abbott, the drummer and the brother of Dimebag Abbott, who had already been shot and likely killed by the time that situation had broken out inside the nightclub. Interestingly enough, Fox News crew has been working the scene in and around Gale's home, Nathan Gale's home, the gunman's home, and have found out that this man may have, and it does appear very likely, to have one time served in the U.S. Marine Corps. We talked to people who were familiar with Gale in and around the area, including a waitress at a nearby diner who said the guy appeared to be alone. Every time he came inside the diner, he was by himself. He would order a meal, he would finish it, and sit there by himself, not speaking or apparently doing anything for long periods of time. Police say they do not know exactly what it was that made Gale set off last night, but it does appear that it was premeditated.
5 dead, at least 2 wounded, when a person in the audience, for some unknown reason, goes on a shooting spree.
I'm numb, man. I don't know. These guys have been my heroes for years, you know, and so I don't know. I still can't believe it happened.
The heavy metal band Damage Plan had just taken to the stage at the El Rosavilla nightclub, and during the first song of the set, attention turns to a man in the audience who rushes the stage with a semi-automatic handgun.
He was just shooting, He was kind of standing behind some speakers, big stack of speakers, and he was just like bang.
The gunman, identified as 25-year-old Nathan Gale, unloads 5 shots, killing guitarist Dimebag, whose real name is Darrell Abbott.
We may never know the motive for this. It's just going to be one of the facts that we have right now. And unless he left a note or there's something he left somewhere else, we may never know the motive.
A bouncer who was trying to pull the shooter off the musician was also shot. No word on his condition. One fan in the front row risking his life to save another.
That's just the blood from the guy I was giving CPR to.
Dimebag.
Right. I tried to help save his life. Do anything anybody else would do. There was a little gurgling in his voice when we were in his box when we were giving him CPR.
Where was he hit, William?
I couldn't see. I couldn't see where he was hit.
The guy that I was helping, he was shot like 2 times here, once in the armpit. That was 3 that I could see because they ripped his shirt open, you know, but I know he was shot at least 3 times.
Witnesses say a police officer took aim at the suspects and with one shotgun blast ended the man's rampage.
He just went crazy and started shooting people, and he backed himself into a corner, and there were bouncers coming at him and people, you know, coming towards him trying to stop him, while, you know, the band members are on the stage laying, you know, shot. There's people trying to stop him, and they couldn't, you know, he just kept shooting people.
Police are questioning hundreds of people who may have witnessed the tragedy. Officials say they are also looking into the possibility that there may be amateur video of what happened inside that club. We're live in the Satellite Center. Tom Haines, 7 News.
5 people were dead, including the gunman who was shot by a policeman. Brian Hamrick has the latest now from Columbus, Ohio.
It was a nightclub concert that turned into chaos. A gunman charged onto stage and opened fire on the band and the crowd, killing 4. Top heavy metal guitarist Dimebag Darrell Abbott died at the scene after being shot several times.
He was still playing. He didn't know what was going on, and he just bap, 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 and then that's when he hit the ground.
He was best known for his days with the band Pantera, but with the band Damage Plan when gunned down. The gunman is identified as 25-year-old Nathan Gale. Columbus police say the rampage was stopped when a lone policeman arrived on the scene. Gale was holding a hostage in a headlock when the officer shot him dead.
It appeared that he was about to kill his hostage when the officer basically put an end to it.
Outside Dimebag Darrell's Texas home, mourners paid their respects.
He was probably the most down-to-earth person you could ever meet.
Aaron Hulk was a club worker and among the 5 dead. Those who knew him say the shooter took away a friend.
They don't see the families they leave behind, friends.
and the opportunity they took away from someone else.
With over 200 witnesses, investigators know what happened. Now they want to know why.
And if not for the quick work of that officer, things could have been even worse. Ryan Hemrick, NBC6.
At a nightclub and opened fire as a band was playing. The shooting left several people dead. It happened last night in Columbus, Ohio. Quick action from a passing policeman may have saved others in the crowd of hundreds. The band Damage Plan had just begun playing at a packed Columbus nightclub when witnesses say a man emerged from the audience holding a gun. Some concertgoers at first thought it was part of the show.
They come onto stage and they basically, he shot the guitarist at first, fired a couple other shots, and then he hid behind stage a little bit, and then everybody started scattering, you know, there's mayhem everywhere.
Police say guitarist DARRELL Abbott, best known as a member of the 90s heavy metal band Pantera, was shot several times at close range before the gunman turned his weapon on other musicians and on the crowd.
And he just went crazy and started shooting people, and he backed himself into a corner, and there were bouncers coming at him and people, you know, coming towards him trying to stop him.
The rampage finally came to an end when the shooter was killed by a police officer who had been patrolling nearby.
He did have a hostage. The officer was able to strategically gun this guy down before he was able to kill his hostage. And it appeared that he was about to kill his hostage.
Police have identified the gunman as 25-year-old Nathan Gale of Marysville, Ohio. Gale died at the scene along with Abbott and 3 others. Police are now investigating if the gunman targeted Abbott for breaking up the band Pantera.
Brings a heavy metal rock concert to a deadly end in Ohio. Witnesses say a gunman with a grudge went on a rampage inside a nightclub.
When it was all over, 5 people were dead. CBS 4's Beatrice Canals joins us now with more details. Beatrice?
Well, tonight he has been identified as Nathan Gale, a 25-year-old man who opened fire inside this club and was eventually killed by a police officer, but not before he would leave a trail of death.
The heavy metal band Damage Plan had just begun when the gunman jumped on stage and opened fire.
He was just shooting. He was kind of standing behind some speakers, big stack of speakers, and he was just like bang, just shooting.
There was a flood of calls to 911.
There's been shots fired. Somebody in the band has definitely been shot. People are running out of the building. We need help as soon as possible.
Witnesses at the Columbus, Ohio nightclub say the shooter clearly had a grudge against guitarist Dimebag Darrell Abbott.
When you see somebody point a gun at one person only and unload 5 rounds in them, something personal's going on.
After shooting Abbott, the gunman took aim at the crowd, killing 3 more. He then took a hostage. The rampage ended when a lone police officer arrived at the Columbus nightclub.
It appeared that he was about to kill his hostage when the officer basically put an end to it.
Abbott was a well-known heavy metal guitarist, and with his brother was a founding member of the Grammy-nominated band known as Pantera, seen here. Their new group played the same type of music.
It's just a nightmare. It's a terrible thing to think that somebody that nutty would go and do something like that.
In the group's hometown of Dallas, fans left flowers and messages in front of Abbott's house. And while they mourn, police are still trying to figure out why the man opened fire. But with Abbott and the gunman dead, they may never know the shooter's motive.
Now, police tonight say the witnesses did hear someone accuse lead guitarist Dimebag of breaking up his former band just before that shooting, but they're still not sure if that speaker was the gunman or a fan. Beatrice Canals, CBS 4
Show
News.
turned massacre in Columbus, Ohio. A gunman climbed on the stage at the start of a show by the band Damage Plan and headed right for the lead guitarist Dimebag Darrell Abbott, one of the founders of the heavy metal band Pantera. Witnesses say the gun yelled something, then shot Abbott several times.
Went up around the left-hand side, walked right behind it, right on stage, straight for the guitarist, like he had something with him, and just started unloading on him. He probably shot him about 5 times.
It was, of course, the gunman who did the yelling, and he's been identified as 25-year-old Nathan Gale. After the guitarist, he turned the gun on the crowd, firing several shots, killing 3 more people and wounding 2 others. He then took a hostage. That's when this policeman entered the fray. to stop the madman in his tracks. Steve Brown with the Fox Report live outside the nightclub in Columbus. Steve?
Shepard, the officer being hailed tonight as a hero is Officer James Negemeyer, a 5-year veteran of the Columbus Police Department who never fired a shot in the line of duty until last night. Officer Negemeyer, alone in a patrol car in the northern portion of Columbus, was patrolling this neighborhood and responded to the 911 calls of a gunman firing shots, that gunman being 25-year-old Nathan Gale. Officer Negemeyer, without a backup, entered the club and found Gale holding a hostage.
He had it looked like the drummer from Pantera. He had by the neck and like in a headlock, and with the gun basically bringing it towards his head, and that's when the cop shot him.
The siege was over, but not before Gale had taken 4 lives, including pioneering heavy metal rock guitarist Dimebag Darrell Abbott. Police will not confirm, but if our witness is correct, the man Gale may have been about to kill was Dimebag Abbott's brother, Vinnie Paul Abbott, the drummer for Damageplan. Now, Fox News has pieced together a little bit about Nathan Gale's life. We know he served in the U.S. Marine Corps for a brief time 2 years ago. His address was Camp Lejeune. We also know that his most recent home was northwest of the location we are right now in a town called Marysville. Folks there say that Gale was a loner, a bit odd, and would make awkward attempts to attach himself or make friends with people in the area. But police say the most disturbing question is motive. They don't have a single idea, and they're hoping to get a hold of what they hear is videotape shot inside the club last night to piece together the scene and try and piece together a motive. Shepard?
Steve Brown live.
Stormed the stage at a packed nightclub last night and opened fire on the band and the crowd. The gunman killed 5 people, including heavy metal guitarist Dimebag Darrell Abbott. Soon after, the gunman was shot dead by police. Here's the terrifying 911 call.
What's emergency? Yeah, I need a police officer in a squad at 6055 Sinclair Road. It's the Ala Sevilla. There's been shots fired. How many shots were fired? Well, there's been multiple. I don't know. Did you see anybody with a gun? Yes. Is there someone shot? Yes. We have the gun, but we need cops, so we need an ambulance. All right, we're going to get officers and medics out there. Okay, please.
Tim Alias and Chris Couch were at the concert last night and witnessed the incident. Tim joins us on the phone from Mansfield, Ohio, and Chris is right outside the club. Chris, how terrifying was it?
It was amazing. I don't know really how else to explain it.
What did you see,
stunned.
Chris? What did you see?
Well, I was standing up by the sound stage. It was about 25 feet away from the stage. The gunman walked right next to us on his way up to the stage on the left-hand side. There was a bouncer and another guy following him. The other guy had a flashlight, flashed it on his backside like they saw something. He walked up the left-hand side of the stage, right around behind the speakers, right out on the stage directly at Dimebag, and just started opening fire. It was just terrifying.
Tim, you were also at the concert. What did you see?
Well, I was standing about 8 to 10 feet away from Dimebag, down by the front barrier at the stage, and I saw a man come from the left side of the stage, and they engaged each other, like the guy was trying to tackle him or something, and I heard several shots, maybe 4 to 5 shots happen within a couple of seconds.
Tim, did you actually see him, Dimebag Darrell Abbott, get shot?
Yes.
Did you think it was part of the act, or did you know that this was a murder going down?
For about the first 10 seconds, I think everybody thought it was part of the act, and I was able to then see blood actually coming out onto the stage, and I turned to start trying to push people towards the back, you know, push people, tell people they needed to start moving away from the stage because the guy was still on stage behind a stack of speakers.
Chris, any idea why?
Honestly, I have no idea. I mean, I could think of no reason to kill a musician who makes such great music. I mean, it just makes no sense.
Chris, did the gunman say anything? Chris, did the gunman say anything?
I couldn't hear anything because, I mean, obviously, it's a rock show, and being that far away, you can't hear anything. I mean, I was lucky to hear the gunshots.
All right, gentlemen, thank you both very much. I appreciate it. Joining us by phone is Sherry Mercurio, spokeswoman for the Columbus Police Department. Sherry, do you know anything about the gunman?
At this point, we're still trying to go through the investigation to determine if he had a motive at all, what the reason for doing such a heinous act was. All we know at this point is he's 25 years old. He's from a neighboring county in a city called Marysville. We know he's 25 years old, and his name is Nathan Gale. But right now, we're still interviewing a lot of people trying to determine who he knew, if he had any relationship whatsoever with the band.
Do you know if he was a fan of this music at all?
It's hard to tell at this point. Obviously, he's no longer with us, so we are trying to go by eyewitness accounts, friends who may have knew anything about him, if he held any vendetta toward the band, what his relationship, if any, was.
Now, the police officer who shot and killed him was pretty heroic, a pretty good shot, right?
Absolutely. What he did was he happened to be in the area patrolling relatively close by. When he heard the call go out about a shooting inside, he immediately headed over. As he was on his way, he heard that there were more shots fired and there was possibly a hostage. He made his way into the back of the club, not knowing what to expect inside, on his own, made his way up to the stage, saw one person already shot on the ground, came around the corner and saw the actual suspect with another individual kind of in a chokehold by his side. The officer was able to get a clear shot and was able to shoot and kill the suspect before he, quite frankly, could have killed a number of other people.
All right, Sherry, thank you very much.
The shooter was Nathan Gale. His friend says he once showed him pages of lyrics copied from Pantera, claiming he'd actually written them. The friends say that Gale was off his rocker and wanted to sue Pantera. The shooter was a former Marine. He stormed the stage at a heavy metal show on Wednesday, gunning down 4 people before a police officer shot him dead. A possible problem.
Dimebag Darrell Abbott, founding member of the heavy metal band Pantera. Friends say Gale was obsessed with Abbott and the band. So how does a fan turn into a crazed murderer? For answers, we turn to criminal profiler Pat Brown. Pat, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Tell us your assessment of this guy, at least based on what we know about what happened. Nathan Gale, said to be a huge fan of this guy, Dimebag Darrell Abbott, and the group Pantera, but something went wrong. Where do you cross the line from being a big fan into an obsessed killer?
Well, there's 2 kinds of stalkers in the world, Brian. One is the kind of stalker who falls in love with the person and they want to be with them, reach out and touch them and be a part of their lives. There's another kind of stalker who wants to be the person he is stalking. In other words, I believe Gale was obsessed with Abbott and Pantera. He wanted to be that person. And if you remember, the story was out about how he showed his friends some lyrics and he'd actually stolen them from Pantera, claimed they were his own. And then later on, when they said, hey, aren't those Pantera's, aren't those Pantera's lyrics? He said, yeah, they stole them from me. He wants to be them. He wants to be Abbott. And over time, he just can't get enough attention, enough of the feeling of being that person. So if you can take them out, that gives you a chance to bond with them. It's a very strange idea. It's hard to understand, but that's his moment in the sun when he gets to bond with Abbott. He gets to essentially be him.
Wow. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah, well.
How do you start to spot up on somebody when they're moving from being a fan to being someone who is a crazed killer? At what point can you pick up on a sign that maybe not at all is all right with this person?
Right. Well, there's the fans who do a little bit of, getting autographs and sending back and forth a few letters and things like that. And then you've got your fans who start contacting you all day long, and essentially emails coming in by the hour, presents constantly showing up, where they're talking to their friends about this person that they're idolizing, and that's all they're talking about to their friends. You can't really tell when they're going to step over, but that's when it starts getting scary. And that's why so many people who are in the limelight have to have bodyguards and be very, very cautious. And there are usually, any star or anybody out there usually has 2 or 3 stalkers actually running around at all times, bothering them, and you kind of always cross your fingers and hope, God, I hope one of these doesn't cross the line, because there is not really good protection 24 hours a day from a stalker, because when they're that interested in you, they will cross the seas, they will follow you around to every concert you do, they'll be there, and if they decide one day to pull that gun, you really don't have much luck with it. So you always hope you're not going to be the target.
Let me ask you a couple quick questions. You say that technically, I guess maybe that we're getting into the terminology of profiling, right, but you say these people aren't obsessed, and then you also say that they're trying to fill a void in their lives. Can you explain that?
Oh, no, they are obsessed.
So it's clearly obsessed.
Oh, absolutely they're obsessed. They're obsessed with that particular person at that time. They're trying to be somebody, but they want to be that person. In this particular case, I said we have the type that they're in love with the person they think, and the type that want to be the person. And that's what, this is the type we have with Gail. He wanted to be that drummer. He wanted to be in that band, but he didn't have the talent to do so. So he linked himself with the Pantera drummer and took on
in a horribly tragic
in his own
way,
mind. Yeah. In a very tragic way. Now he's got his moment in the sun, doesn't he?
Okay, Pat, we're all out of time. Thank you.